Eva Marsh is still dancing. Expanded edition of Black Patent Shoes, Dancing with MS. Introduction to Still Dancing. Since publication of Black Patent Shoes, Dancing with MS in 1996, many readers have asked if I recovered from the last episode. Rereading Chapter 16, I can see I left readers up in the air. I had assumed everyone would know, of course, I would recover from the disabling symptoms of 1991, and yes, I did. I'm now 73, and I'm living, walking, talking, dancing proof of healing and recovering from the damage of multiple sclerosis. Some readers have asked if after 20 years I would change anything. I had written, and the answer is no. But I would like to expand on a few points and share some information I have gathered since 1996. Black Patent Shoes, Dancing with MS has reached 5th printing, and generous readers have provided translations in German and Russian. After publication, I expected the world to come knocking at my door. After all, I was sharing my experience of recovery with factual proof that damaged myelin can repair itself with movement. I was so naive. For 10 years, I sent my book to Oprah's book club. No response. Contact with major radio and TV networks yielded no response. With my webpage, http://msrecovery.org, and my email, eva@evamarsh.net, the world has come to me as I widen my reach to people anxiously waiting for information to answer their pressing questions. The current belief system that recovery is impossible, we just need a new drug, is so strong. I sometimes wonder if I'm making any headway. Pat, Mandy, Gladys, Hamilton, Graham Hicks, and Carol and Jim Cooper critiqued the draft manuscript for this edition and suggest that even if you have read my story, please read it again to refresh the details so you are ready to follow me through the past 20 years. Many thanks to Louise Lebrun at WEL Systems Institute for the graphics. With the critical attention of editor Dia Capelli and technical skills of Beck's Printing, my manuscript has morphed into this expanded edition of Black Patent Shoes, Dancing with MS. I am deeply grateful to all my readers for sharing your success stories. You have kept me going, and I thank you all for encouraging me to continue writing and speaking. Eva Marsh, September 24th, 2017. Forward to Still Dancing. I have known Eva for over 30 years. We met through our husbands who had work relationship. We began to socialize and quickly became friends. One day after I had known Eva for about 4 years, she dropped into our home and asked me if I would read and critique the draft manuscript that she had written. I was very surprised that the topic was her life with multiple sclerosis. I had no idea she had been challenged with MS. As a nurse, I had not previously met anyone with a diagnosis of MS who had so much energy and who was actively engaged in multiple projects. We spent many hours with a few glasses of wine on the first day of my enlightenment, talking about Eva's health history and research on MS. Since reading the first edition of Black Patent Shoes, we've had a lot more discussion about her personal struggles with MS, and more importantly, her continued research and approach to maintaining good health. Eva approaches everything with enthusiasm and determination. She prepares for her hikes in England and Wales by long walks for several weeks in advance to build up her stamina for rugged country. We traveled to China together with a group. The trip was exciting and extensive. We spent long days with much walking on daily tours. Eva participated in every event and even the difficult walk on the Great Wall of China. She does not let MS get in the way of experiencing a fulfilling life. Eva views health in a holistic framework, living and studying not only the physical impacts of MS, but also the emotional, mental, and spiritual impacts. Her belief in mind over matter has sustained her through her most difficult times. Eva's family is important to her, and she has a close relationship with her daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, even though they live at a distance. Eva has developed and maintains a large network, many of whom she has engaged as ambassadors for her life's work in dealing with the myths and truth about MS. She also actively seeks expert and activities to expand her knowledge and experience to add to the academic research that she continually pursues. I have witnessed her determination to educate other people about multiple sclerosis. Eva advises and assists people to research treatment options, not only for MS, but for any health issues. Eva makes herself available to meet with people diagnosed with MS, their families and groups, to bring awareness and hope to those who are struggling. She holds many educational sessions for the public. She has worked and been acknowledged internationally for her expertise on MS. You will enjoy reading her book and catching up on her life since the first edition. I recently reread the original book, and it was like reading it for the first time. I had forgotten the engaging style of writing and how quickly I became absorbed in her story. It is not all work and no play. Eva has a busy social life. She enjoys traveling, parties, dining out, and dancing. And her husband, Don, hosts large parties on their farm. She is an amazing, strong, and determined woman. Eva is an inspiration and role model, not only for those impacted by MS, but for all women. I'm honored to call her my friend, Pat Mandy, RN, MPA, CHE. Forward to Black Patent Shoes Dancing with MS. When Eva first appeared in my office a few months after I had left the UK to take up a position at McMaster University, I was told by my secretary that there was a young woman who had some questions to ask concerning the nervous system. As Eva swept in and started asking her questions, I began a long and gradual process of getting to know her and of learning her remarkable story. And it is a remarkable one. As a young mother, to be struck down by paralysis and to be told that you have multiple sclerosis must surely be bad enough. To be deserted by your husband and left with 2 young children would be an impossible burden for most to bear. How Eva was able to rise above her adversity is the story of this book. There is much frankness in the book, and it would therefore be out of place if I did not admit that as a practicing physician. I was initially disconcerted by Eva. We neurologists especially are dependent on the categorization of established knowledge. For example, we like to make a precise diagnosis in a new patient and then to give an accurate prognosis. Or if we rightly hesitate to convey bad news to our patient, we wish to have, at least in our own minds, a clear picture as to the likely outcome of an illness. Even in research, when our minds should be as free as possible, there is a curious reluctance to shed old knowledge and to embrace new discoveries and ways of thinking. If it is difficult to respond appropriately when another member of the medical profession provides the stimulus, the challenge is all the greater when it comes from a patient such as Eva. Reading her book, we should ask ourselves how Eva managed to recover so completely from each episode of paralysis. Many, I suppose, will consider that she was an unusually lucky patient, but as new information is gathered concerning the interactions between the mind and the endocrine and immune systems, may we not wonder if Eva's unquenchable spirit was a major factor in her remission. In recommending this book, I would like to join with Eva in singing out the late Dr. Daniel Levy for praise. As a neurologist serving the Hamilton region for many years, Dr. Levy's kindness, clinical skills, enormous empathy helped thousands of patients and relatives through difficult times. Eva was one of those patients. To those joining McMaster University, such as myself, Dr. Levy paved the way for a successful, enjoyable, and enduring town-gown relationship. All this and much more is contained in Eva's story. I strongly recommend it for reading, not only by patients with MS, but by all those with serious, long-standing illnesses. Her message is clear. Find out as much as you can about your illness. Listen to the doctor, but think the problem through for yourself. Form your own judgments and make your own decisions. Try to maintain your independence. Above all, no matter how bleak the future appears, keep on fighting. Doctors and other healthcare professionals will also benefit from reading Eva's story. Foolish indeed is the person who thinks he has nothing to learn. Alan J. McComas, M.B., Professor of Biomedicine, McMaster University, Hamilton, Canada. Chapter 1. Bridgeview Survey was a series of hard-packed red clay ravines with huge, graceful trees and small meadows on the edge of Hamilton, Ontario. My dad had moved us here after he found work in the steel mills across the bay. The woods with all the birds and small animals were magic to explore, and the old orchards were a perfect place to build tree forts from which I could watch the activity in the birds' nests. Every Saturday, Mother and I took the bus into town for my dancing lessons at Jack and Marion Lemon's School of Dance. For an hour, I tapped and shuffled and sang my heart out, and no one told me to be quiet. Even when I practiced my routines at home and tapped through trouble spots over and over, no one could object. After all, I was supposed to practice. Dad wanted me to take dancing lessons because he thought that I was clumsy. Little did we know that this awkwardness was an early manifestation of my MS. I just wanted black patent leather dancing shoes with taffeta bows like the other kids, but Dad said they were too flimsy. He bought me black lace-up Oxfords for good support. Enviously, I watched the others moving lightly in their pretty shoes and began to think that I was clumsy because I had to wear sturdy Oxfords. Someday I vowed I would have every style of black patent shoes I wanted. My scientific curiosity had its roots in my early experiences. Many special times were spent with my Uncle Ed at MacDonald College near Montreal. Uncle Ed was a serious university student who always had time to talk to me and answer my questions. When I was 8, I lived with him and Aunt Ardis for 6 months, and he paid me 25 cents a week to help him raise houseflies for his research experiments in entomology. It was more exciting to go to the lab after school and count flies' eggs in petri dishes than play with other kids. Science was orderly and serene, and the excitement that built up over a long period of reading and study ended in a paper published with Uncle Ed's name as author. You can understand my dismay when my school project on the 4 stages in the life cycle of the housefly did not receive the same recognition. Science helped me solve problems by concentrating only on the important points. I thought that adults made everything too complicated with a lot of trivia that simply obscured the obvious solution. In the end, so much extraneous information was brought to bear that the problem was never solved, and we had even more problems to deal with. They said when I was growing up I would understand. Throughout my teens, I maintained my interest in learning new things. In high school, I enjoyed babysitting for Dennis and Sue Bailey because they had more books than I had seen outside of a library. Once they came home early and found me down on the carpet leaping through a huge dictionary learning new words. Dennis laughed, and his collection were volumes of erotic art, books he thought would be more interesting to a teenage girl. In the fall of 1963, I happily went off to the Ontario Veterinary College in Guelph. There I met a handsome, quiet, blonde cowboy named Zane from Western Ontario. He exuded self-confidence, and in my girlish naivete, I thought his reticence demonstrated a strong personality and depth of character. We soon paired off, and at the end of the first year we got married in Calgary. Since this was before the advent of student loans, we both couldn't continue in the veterinary program. When we returned to Guelph in the fall, I dropped out and got a job in the provincial pesticide lab on campus. There I could have a paycheck and satisfy my need to study science. Doing my job, I added to my knowledge of physiology, anatomy, and the secret language of medical terminology. One of my responsibilities was to scan scientific and medical journals for relevant papers. This skill would prove invaluable later. Life moved in a pleasant cycle of work and student activities that relieved Zane's heavy course of study in veterinary medicine. There were noisy fraternity parties, bridge games, and the Student Wives Club to fill every spare moment. The many textile mills in the area were full of bargain fabrics, and I sewed into all the latest styles. Zane didn't like me to dress so flashy. Even when pregnant with Joanne and then Bonnie, I continued working in the lab to help make ends meet. Although Zane was proud of his 10-pound babies, he wasn't interested in holding or talking to them because they couldn't understand what he said. So I found myself being both breadwinner and parent. The lab routine was a refuge, and I was pleased that the results of the experiments I performed yielded good results. Then a shadow moved over my world. There was a vague but persistent discomfort in my right arm, and I couldn't accurately measure solutions in test tubes. It hurt my pride when I spoiled some experiments by being clumsy. The family doctor found nothing wrong and suggested that I find a hobby. He thought I was a silly young mother without interests. He ignored my objection that hobbies were not a special solution for a working wife with 2 children. The doctor also ignored my description of other formless systems of transparent tingling and weakness that had occurred since I was 8 years old, and the loss of my vision when I was 16. He dismissed the scuffed toe of my right shoe as female vanity. By the end of 1966, there were more inexplicable tingling in my arms and legs, and I began to drag my right foot so much that my shoes were ruined. Zane agreed with the doctor that I was losing my grip on things. He seemed unaware that I saw him studying my scuffed shoes. By 1967, the doctor was growing very annoyed with my visits, but still he refused my request for a referral to a specialist. He said that the only specialist he'd send me to would be a psychiatrist. If that's where the problem is, I'd like to know myself, I retorted, but still no referral. A few days after that, Zane and I were involved in a rear-end collision on the way home from the campus. I associated the increased numbness in my leg with whiplash, but the progressive loss of control of my right leg was far more alarming. On St. Patrick's Day morning, 1967, when I tried to vault out of bed, my right leg wouldn't move. The weight of my body pulled me over the edge of the bed in a heap. I was so angry with the family doctor that instead of suffering his arrogance again, I made an appointment with my obstetrician who had shown interest in my symptoms on previous visits. He referred me to Dr. McCrae, an internist whom I agreed to meet in the outpatients department of the city hospital. Dr. McCrae asked me precise questions about my medical history, making particular note of my funny symptoms. He wanted to admit me for 2 weeks of bed rest and steroid treatment. That was impossible. The very heavy third-year course load prevented Zane from caring for the children, and I had to get back to work. We couldn't ask friends to help. To Zane, that was an admission of incompetence. How long will it take to get over the whiplash, I asked. Is there some spinal damage? I'd like you to see a neurologist in Toronto. Because there isn't one in Guelph, Dr. McRae replied. Then perhaps we'll all know what's really going on. That night Zane told me that he had settled with the insurance company and signed off any further claim. I was very upset that he would do so without talking it over with me. There could be damage to my spine because of this accident. Didn't you think of that before signing off? I need the money to get another car, he said. School is the only reason I came to Ontario. Another kind of paralysis began to blanket me. Chapter 2. April 1967. My husband, the person I love most of all in the world, has moved to sit across the room in the farthest seat from me. His voice drones on. I cannot understand all that he is saying, but I know that it's dreadful. Why isn't he sitting with me? Why isn't he holding my hand? I don't hear the words he is saying. I want so much to hear him say, "It's okay, I'm here, I love you." But the words don't come. He stands up now because he's finished telling me why the specialist called him at the university. There's recrimination in his voice. He is late coming home because he stayed to read about it in the medical library. Far from away, my voice floats past. What does it mean? What did you read in the library? He said he would rather not tell me. I must know, I insist, but I really don't want to hear. He stares at his hands, picking his nails as he regurgitates what he has read word for word. He is a student, and students can do this. Paralysis, sight disturbances, course is usually prolonged. Paralysis, prolonged. There's a disease in sheep called scrappy. It's a lot like MS. They're doing research. My mind is so numb I cannot even react. Sheep? Why can't he say, "I love you, this doesn't matter"? But it does matter. The distance grows. Suddenly 2 words make me a stranger. In his mind, these 2 words strip me of my individuality and guarantee a life of no future. They make me a burden. I can sense the fear and revulsion in a cloud around him. He hates disease and imperfection. He wants to be a veterinarian so that he can cure animals or know when to put them out of their misery. The implications are devastating now, and I know that I'm being abandoned. And what will become of them, my husband and my beautiful little girls? What about me? I'm only 22 years old. I haven't even lived yet. How can we be talking about dying? A slow death in isolation, loneliness and severe disability. Surely my mind would die before my body ever could. Now he is done. There's no more to say. I want him to sit with me and hold my hand, but he says he's going to study now. Please stay with me. I reach out to touch him as he brushes past me. He says he has to work to even harder now because he will have a cripple to support, and that takes a lot of money. I'm devastated. I can't think what to do. So I sit. The walls of the apartment are landlord beige, impersonal. We haven't made a mark in our surroundings, but I've been too busy with college life to notice. Now time has stopped. There's nothing but a void where our lives were. Zane gets up in the morning and prepares to leave for classes, pretending to be surprised that I've been sitting here all night. I haven't moved in 12 hours. I couldn't think of what to do. Why should I? No one will expect me to be able to do anything. At least I can find out more about MS. My ignorance scares me. However terrible MS really is, I have to know the facts, not just conjectures and opinions. Don't, Eva, Zane begs. Don't do that. It's too upsetting. But I don't trust the opinions of others. Pure research is an impartial description of embellished facts that allow me to make up my own mind. Angrily, I insist. I need to know right away. You know I will go to the library as soon as I can anyway, so why don't you help me now? He slips through the door without answering. Perhaps he'll be able to walk when the shock wears off. There's no doubt in my future. There's been stuff on TV so I know that there are no expectations for people with MS. The children are moving around in their cribs, anxious to get up and get on with the day. Joanne is 2 years old, a chubby-faced type with the disposition of an angel. Bonnie is just a year old, and already she's her own personality, a combination of frantic noise and impudence. I make myself go through the motions, releasing them from their prisons of cribs and pajamas. They hurry me along to the kitchen, still very excited by the novelty of my presence so late in the morning. I've been away from the lab since St. Patrick's Day, 3 weeks. They haven't noticed that my legs don't work properly. One is paralyzed, the other has no sensation. I move with the gait of a stranded hippo. My eyes jerk annoyingly to one side. They expect me to make breakfast, to dress them and take them to the park because they don't know any better. How long will I be able to do these things before the inexorable progression of disease takes over my life? All done, Mom. Joanne shows me her empty bowl. Good girl. Go potty now, then find your shoes. Funny, standing in front of the mirror, I look the same as I did yesterday. My legal identification is still valid, but everything has changed and nothing will ever be the same. Will I be strong enough for all of us? How will I know what to do? Who will tell me what I need to know? I leaf quickly through Lane's physiology book, but I don't even know what I'm looking for. Chapter 3. I call to the specialist's office, schedules a meeting for this afternoon. I take more care than usual with my appearance to dispel the force of the diagnosis and to reassure myself that I'm still me. In the waiting room I'm calm and composed, but once his office door closes, I explode. Why didn't you tell me this? It is your responsibility. You should have told us together. Dr. McRae sits quietly behind his desk. His hands are white. He looks beyond me and waits for me to wear myself down. Finally, my shaking legs give out, and I collapse into a chair. Sadly, he explains, I had hoped to make it easier for you both. I thought that telling your husband first would give him the chance to collect himself, and there would be 2 of us for support. What did he tell you? I described the horror of his monologue, and yet I defend my husband, making excuses why it's harder for him to deal with it than for me. The doctor asks, what is your reaction? It's a relief. A relief? In the flood of old memories come from a past more real than uncertain present, a past that is clear now as a series of events flash in progression. Even as a child there were signs that my physical control was amiss. Sometimes when I played tag with my right knee would suddenly buckle. The other kids would laugh loudly as I lay in a heap on the lawn. In ballet class, my graceful tour jeté sometimes ended badly as that knee gave way. I had difficulty in determining my left from my right. This occasionally made gym periods agony, and I pretended that I didn't care about organized sports because the teasing was embarrassing. And all those headaches. When I mentioned all this to the family doctor, he just told me not to go at things so hard, that I was just overexerting myself. But most of all, I understood what was behind the terrifying experience of losing my sight when I was 16. I had spent one January afternoon horseback riding, plunging into drifts and enjoying the winter sunshine. By night my eyes were watering and my vision was blurred from the glare of the sun on the snow, I told myself. But when I awoke the next day, everything was gray and green, like an underwater movie. My father sat in the waiting room as the eye doctor explained to me that there was paralysis of the optic nerve and referred me to a specialist in internal medicine. Dr. John Sibley was a smiling man who combed through my medical history thoughtfully. He asked me to tell him more about my sudden falls. Had I ever noticed any numbness or tingling, any loss of balance? He arranged to have me admitted for observation. The next day he returned to do a spinal tap. I didn't understand what was happening, and the student nurses who surrounded the bed didn't know what was going on either. Later in the day, Dr. Sibley returned and asked me to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks. With rest and quiet, the optic nerve would heal itself, he assured me. The spinal fluid had elevated protein, he said. It had been drummed into me to never question my elders, so I didn't ask what elevated protein meant, and he didn't explain. My parents were unquestioning in their trust that I was getting all the care I needed. Before I was discharged, Dr. Sibley returned to say goodbye. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he held my hand and said, "It'll be several weeks before your eyes are back to normal, Eva. This might happen to you again. Next time perhaps an arm or a leg will be involved, but it will always go away in time." His words were beyond my comprehension. But the significance of an appointment with a psychiatrist wasn't lost on me. "I'm not crazy," I flared up angrily. I agreed to keep the appointment only after Dr. Sibley explained that he wanted me to have someone to talk to if there were more problems. George Stone didn't act like a psychiatrist. He never told me what to do, although he asked a few questions about my eye problems. Mostly he listened to my real problems at home and school. Talking to him seemed to make solutions obvious. Once I asked him how he knew whether or not I was telling the truth. He wasn't a gullible man. He said the only thing that mattered was my perception of my problems. This was all we could deal with. And he listened. He would carefully pack his pipe and light it. He was a slight man with jet black hair who made me think of Bogart characters, handsome but tough. The only security I remembered as a teenager was knowing that I could talk to George, and that he respected my right to private thoughts. He wasn't upset when I talked back. Each time I left his office, I carried away a golden nugget of support. George encouraged me to go to university and helped me to get a bursary for tuition and residence for the first year. He told me not to worry about the future, that the only limits would be those that I would allow. Now Dr. McRae in Guelph is surprised that I'm relieved that we finally know what's going on. Multiple sclerosis is going on. At this moment, in this office, I'm relieved that someone else knows all the obscure and unconfirmed symptoms since I was 8 years old have a basis other than my imagination. Multiple sclerosis is not a mental disorder. Please keep the appointment in Toronto. A neurologist should confirm the diagnosis. What will you do now? What choice is there? I have a job, 2 little children to look after, and a husband who has to finish university. You'll have to reduce your physical activity and get a lot of rest, or you'll make it worse on yourself. You mean it gets worse? In what way? Too much physical activity and stress accelerates the progress of the disease. Don't you want to be around to see your children graduate from school? A grim picture flashed through my mind. Not like that, I don't. I'd rather live a few years as fully as possible than 20 years incapacitated just so I can be wheeled to some ceremony. At least there won't be any pain, he continues. There's no feeling because the nerves die. They're doing very good research. Research, I explode. I do research. I know about research. If there's any advance in my lifetime, it won't be available for at least 20 years. You surely don't expect me to bank on research. He passes one hand over his eyes and rests it on the desk again. For the first time he looks me straight in the eye. When you accept it, you'll be more realistic. The delivery of his words is measured and final. Not only have I been changed, but my reality has been redefined in terms that I don't understand. I can't accept what I don't understand. Acceptance implies a choice. What choice? Quit and die, or fight and die? It's late when my husband returns. He puts some books on the table and makes himself a coffee. I have to study. He hasn't time to talk about my visit to Dr. McRae. From habit, I reach for Dorland's Medical Dictionary first. It describes MS as sclerosis, diffuse, disseminated, multiple sclerosis, diffuse, widely distributed, not localized, disseminated, scattered, distributed over considerable area in both time and space. Dumbly, I read words in the physiology book about chemical lesions, voluntary movement, steroids, and degeneration of nerve fibers. There's a lot about disability and death, but the words don't tell me what I need to know to live. Another text describes how the unknown agent of destruction attacks the myelin, covering the nerve cell, causing the symptoms of disease. The myelin becomes inflamed and is replaced by support cells, causing patches of scar tissue which slow or block nerve impulses. The third book is a teaching text with a chapter on managing MS, which begins by describing all the current theories. For heaven's sake, don't they know anything sure themselves? Virus, autoimmunity, carbohydrate metabolism, unnamed enzymes, serum albumin deficiencies, these are all just hypotheses as to the cause of MS. It's all a guessing game. So how can anyone be so sure that my life is over? The next section describes drug treatments. I look for steroid therapy. The words jump out. Most systematic investigations seem to be more pessimistic, doubtful that steroid therapy has a favorable effect. If that's true, why would Dr. McRae want me to have this treatment? And there's more. Blood transfusion are even more doubtful than steroid therapy. Vague ideas, hypothetical basis for treatment, greatest risk of factors. For symptomatic treatment of extreme spasticity, muscle relaxants, surgery, reading about the surgical procedures makes me gag. Is this all that medicine has science can offer in 1967? In spite of claiming that physiotherapists have a key role in therapy, the text doesn't give them much to do other than training of general physical condition and training of compensatory functions when ordinary functions are considered to be permanently lost. What about getting functions back? The body repairs all kinds of damage. I can't grow new limbs, but I can heal broken bone and scrape skin. Okay, so severed nerves can be reconnected, but it doesn't make sense that damaged nerves can't be repaired in some way. A few weeks ago, my legs were very bad, but they're much better now. I couldn't stay in bed. The daily routine of our household had to be carried out. If I don't keep trying to make my legs work, I'll never know if there's been some repair. My head aches. My eyes are burning. My sleep is heavy, and morning comes before I can rest. Zane can't miss the final exams to go to Toronto with me. When I protest that I've never driven there, he says, "Get Sue Bailey to go. She's driven to Toronto before," but I wanted him to go with me, not Sue Bailey. We have to talk about what is happening to me because it's happening to all of us. He can't keep avoiding the problem. We have to talk about our lives because we have responsibilities. We're not carefree college kids anymore. My husband was the strongest person I had ever met. If his reaction is to avoid me, what will be his reaction of my family and friends? I can't cope with more rejection. I don't want to be alone. There isn't anyone to care, to listen, to trust. There isn't anyone to help me to understand. And all that I can think is that I don't want to be alone. If people will stay away from me because I have MS, then I won't tell anyone. I'll pretend there's nothing wrong. I won't talk about the specialist and the diagnosis. I'll just say that I had some funny kind of virus. But I'm fine now, thank you. My friends won't even know that I'm leaning on them. Somehow I'll bluff it through. When we play bridge and I bid my hands too high, my partner, Alex, always says, "Play 'em like you got 'em, Eve." I'll play all right. I'll bluff for the life of me. The trip to Toronto with Sue Bailey driving leads to another doctor's office, another medical history, another physical examination. Across another desk, neurologist Joe Murata says, "It's my opinion that you're suffering from multiple sclerosis. Have you thought about what you will do?" I've decided not to tell anyone about it, just to keep going as long as I can. "That's good," he nods. "Don't change any of your plans." I've followed over 400 cases of MS in my career, and no two have progressed the same way. I've seen some people get along for years with few problems, and others progress very quickly into wheelchairs and beds. I've also seen many cases with long remissions between episodes, so no one really can say what the prognosis will be. I think that there is a personality factor, because those people who keep up their spirits and stay busy do much better than others. Just don't overtire yourself. Get as much sleep as you need and look after your health generally. The sun seems to cause problems, so try to avoid being out too much. Why? I wail in dismay at the thought of living in shadows for all time. The sun makes people with MS weak. No one knows why. He doesn't understand that I need the sun to keep me strong. I don't argue the point, because I will do as I see fit. Driving back to Guelph, I consider what Dr. Murata has said. Never mind the stuff about the sun. At least he didn't tell me to be realistic, or worse, to accept. He actually had encouragement to offer, and perhaps Zane, too, will be encouraged by this neurologist's experience with so many cases of MS. But all that he hears is that the diagnosis has been confirmed. The rest, he says, is just to shut me up. He has news of his own. He has taken a summer job in Prince Edward Island. The boys in Charlottetown Clinic need me there. They're frat brothers. I owe them. Zane involved himself in more class activities, played more sports, and spent a lot of time at the fraternity house. These were blameless ways to avoid me dealing with multiple sclerosis. He couldn't separate me from the diagnosis. More and more often he was too tired from studying for any affection. One night he barked at me to leave him alone. Soon it took 1 or 2 drinks before he could look at me. After 4 or 5 he could touch me, but the closeness was gone, and I gritted my teeth, retreating into the dark place of my own. Determined to keep up appearances like a good wife should, I tried to do anything to keep my marriage together, even at the cost of my dignity and self-respect. Divorce was a sin, and I kept fooling myself that everything would be all right. We would work things out. Zane planned to leave for Prince Edward Island right after the final exams in mid-May. The summer would give him time to sort things out in his own mind, and with his return in September, I was sure that our marriage would be stronger. He just needed more time. After the last exam, he packed hurriedly and went out to have the car serviced for the trip to the East Coast. He had bought a red sports car, saying he could resell it in the fall and make a profit. As I opened the suitcase to add the last 2 freshly ironed shirts, I saw a supply of safes. The urge to snip the ends off was tempting, but what was the point? Every which way I lost. In the morning, Zane escaped in the red sports car to summer fun without me and MS. For me, the summer was going to be a time to figure out what I should do. The prospect of being on my own with the children wasn't frightening anymore. It was the first real challenge in my life, and the first test of my plan to live as normally as possible. I returned to the lab in the first week of June, when I could easily drive the Volkswagen again. 3 months after my St. Patrick's Day shock. I felt like I had suffered a bout of flu that had never quite blossomed. I knew the children were safe during the day with Mrs. McGovern, a delightful Scottish. I knew the children were safe during the day with Mrs. McGovern, a delightful Scottish lady who came into our place. The children picked up bits of her brogue. Joanne told me one morning, "I diona ken flin ma stockings, Mum." The summer passes, days at the lab, evenings with the children, long nights perspiring in the heat. Up and down 3 flights we go, children, laundry, groceries, garbage, and I am losing my momentum. Summer leaves the campus deserted and I'm always alone, even in the lab. There are fewer experiments to do, so I have more time to read and study. Besides sending for reprints of articles relevant to my job, I also request journal articles about MS. There's a paper that presents the hypothesis that multiple sclerosis is the result of dietary deficiencies. Wouldn't that be simple to deal with? There are pages of biochemical verbiage with incomprehensible phrases. Fatty acid of glycerol blah 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 from white matter of patients with MS was less than half of that found in normal white matter. Number of cases reported is too small to permit generalizations to be made. Low incidence in Japan may be attributed to widespread use of soybeans and marine foods. The authors conclude with the acknowledgement that many basic data need to be acquired. However, since MS is so critical, they justify publication in spite of apparent gaps in knowledge. While I appreciate that 99% of research is discovering what doesn't work, I'm dismayed by this paper and others like it. They seem to be reports of exaggerated theories with no evidence. Is this a case of publish or perish? Trying to get useful information about living with MS from the MS Society, the public health nurse, or the family doctor is futile. The MS Society only tells me that I have to get ready for severe disability, and then they'll help me get a wheelchair. After reading the pamphlets they sent, I knew they had nothing to offer me. The public health nurse tells me to ask my doctor. My doctor tells me that I already know enough. The idea that doctors could be fired still hadn't occurred to me. I want to know what happens in the nervous system. Why exactly should I stay out of the sun? My ignorance terrifies me and I'm being told to be realistic. There's nothing I can do to help myself? But is that realistic? Why am I being coerced into giving up to the haphazard progress of a disease that may be rampant in my nervous system and discouraged from trying to guard my health? Why are they so anxious to take away my life and my dreams and substitute a reality that cannot be defined? I cannot accept that I must be paralyzed. I cannot accept that I must sit and be useless. I cannot accept that I must stay out of the sun. I cannot accept that there's nothing I can do to alter the course of the inexorable. Maybe they can't do anything, but I will. My reality will be different. The reduced workload in the lab gives me more time to spend in my medical library. Surely I find some answers here. Nothing in these volumes can be more frightening than my ignorance. So I spend the first of many lunch hours in the library with a medical dictionary on my lap and volumes of medical journals spread out on a study table. At the index in the stacks, hunched over the texts and volumes of journals, I investigate MS. I understand practically nothing that I read, but I can't stop. I am driven. I need enough and think enough and about the material. Surely I will comprehend something. I make notes, send for even more reprints, and finally stop shaking as I turn the pages. In the 1966 volume of the Journal of Neurology, I found an article titled Regeneration of Myelin in Multiple Sclerosis by Irving Feigin and Nina Popoff. By studying slides of tissues with an electron microscope, they found evidence of myelin repair in MS plaques of damage. The newly formed myelin is not the same as the original myelin. So what? I must do the job after all. I'm walking again, and driving, and climbing stairs. There must have been enough repair to allow me to function as before. The paper concludes, if ways were found to enhance the regeneration observed in this study, a clinically useful purpose might be served. Did I enhance the process by making myself resume my regular activities? Is it that simple? Did the girls enhance the process by expecting me to go on as usual? They didn't pay attention to my right leg that scuffed or my right knee that didn't bend properly, so I didn't either, and soon my walk was normal again. One of the references is a paper about the ultrastructural study of remyelinization by Bunge and Ress, published in 1961 journal that covers biophysics, biochemistry, and cytology. First, I reach for the dictionary and look up the word ultrastructure. Ultrastructure, the structure beyond the resolution power of the light microscope. The abstract is pretty straightforward, describing the detailed study of prepared tissue samples from cats with damage like that in multiple sclerosis for over a year after the lesion had been caused. The first sign of myelin repair was observed after 19 days by 64 days of all nerve damage was thinly repaired. The authors suggest that myelin is reformed in the same way as it is first formed in normal development, but none that this does not agree with present views. Somehow this encourages me. After all, advances are not made by people who think the same as everybody else. The rest of the paper is far beyond my comprehension, but one observation stands out. The neurological condition of the experimental animal begins to improve at a time when remyelinization begins and has returned to normal by the time most axons are at least partly remyelinated. I'm sure that all these kitty cats wanted to get going as soon as possible. They did it in 64 days, and it took me from March 17 to the middle of May. Pretty close. Then in another volume I find the scary stuff. The terrifying words jump out: dying, inexorable progression, incontinence, euphoria, muscle atrophy, institutionalized, mean average duration 22 years. Oh, I don't want to die at 44 years of age. Not that way. There's nothing to say about me to mark my time on this earth. Who would look after my children? Who would help them with their homework? How long would they remember me? Would anyone remember me? Or will they all just be relieved when it's over? How much time do I have? How can I make them remember that I'm a part of their lives? But why should they remember me at all? I'm such a dope. I don't even like myself. I live in a cocoon of children, job, bridge games with no accomplishments. Obviously, I'll have to change and become the kind of person that I want them all to miss. Never mind missing me after I'm gone. I want people to be with me now. What do I admire in people? That they are well-read, informed, healthy, and happy. I feel good when I'm with them, and I want to be like them. I am going to be someone who will be missed. What can I do to look as healthy as I feel? I buy some magazines with makeup hints and hairdos. After I cut my hair and shampoo and some highlights, I tackle my wardrobe. I take 3 evenings to shorten my hems. On my lunch hour, I find sexy Hollywood-style sandals. The occasional wink from some passers-by even when I have children in tow, makes me smile. I buy better books to read. No more of those detective thrillers or cheap romances. Just books about real people and real events. But the unremitting responsibility of children and job wears me down. The colorless and airless apartment depresses me. Sometimes I scream at the children for no reason. They don't understand. So they start to cry, and I become more frustrated. It's a good excuse to put them to bed, even though it's an hour until bedtime. In the apartment playground, people look up at my windows and look at each other. The children cry, and I cry. Tears of frustration, rage, fear, anger, and confusion. There's no way out. Maybe I should commit suicide. Suicide, now that's a sin. Everyone would know how weak I am. Maybe it wouldn't have to look like suicide. I wonder if there are ways to do it without leaving definite evidence. Not now, though. There's no one to look after my girls. They're so small and innocent. I am determined they will never suffer any on my account. We have to get out of the apartment. We need space and air every day, and not just on the weekends. After work the next day, I pack a lunch and take off for an adventure with Joe and Bonnie. We put on straw hats, and I put some wet face cloths in plastic bags for wipe-ups and in case the sun really does bother me. Then we're off. Guelph has many beautiful parks, and most of them are along the river with playgrounds and picnic tables. We walk slowly along the gravel paths where the Speed River winds peacefully under the huge trees by gently rising embankments with thick, lush turf that invites bare feet. The park people are relaxed and friendly, and the girls romp with other children while I walk as gracefully as I can. The river has been dammed to make a pool for water fun. Joe understands my wanting to stay away. But the attraction is too much for Bonnie, who is just 1.5. Again and again I call her away from the pool. While I'm giving Joe a push on the swing, I see that Bonnie's moving quickly toward the water again. I reach the pool just as she launches herself in a joyful leap into the water. Her head bobs up, and I just miss grabbing her dress as she goes under again, sputtering in surprise. A man close by fishes her out and hands her to me. She's gasping, "More, Mummy, more!" "Your little girl is quite a handful," the man says, climbing out. As I bundle up my Bonnie, he fetches coffee and popsicles. My hand trembles as I sip at the hot, sweet drink. The crisis is over, and I'm grateful for the stranger's intervention. He remarks that he's never seen us in the park. When I explain that my husband is working in PEI for the summer, he says that he wouldn't have left me alone for 4 months. Too many guys on the lookout. The thought that I might be attractive makes me blush. It doesn't seem wrong to let him take us to the burger place, and then it doesn't seem wrong to go to dinner later without the girls. But I already have so many problems. I don't need more complications. A few awkward and sterile letters arrived from my husband in Prince Edward Island, signed, "Yours sincerely." The summer has given me a lot to think about. There's no longer any stress in it, being alone with all the responsibility. I make the decisions, I make the plans. I don't have to justify what I spend, or where I go, or how much gas I burn. A man is a lot of work. This summer, I had much less laundry and cooking to do, and no mending. Zane may have made a big mistake leaving me alone this long. Perhaps I don't need him in my life. As one glorious summer day melds with the next, I gain in physical and mental strength. I revel in a confidence that I've never had before. It's obvious to me in the way that I walk and the greater case of conversation I enjoy with the park people. With September comes time for Zane's return. since he has sold the little red sports car he's returning by plane. In anticipation, I made a new outfit to wear to the airport. He gets off the plane tanned and handsome with a set of golf clubs and a bottle of whiskey. Right away he tells me that he thinks we can make it. Let's celebrate, because there's no obvious physical deficit. It's easy to pretend that there's no problem. I'm determined that our last years at the college will seem as normal as possible. As the months rumble by, every event and contact with the friends is so special that the memories burn into my mind. If ever I am immobile in spite of my efforts, at least I'll have my memories to recall, with all the color, texture, taste, and sound of the events themselves. Every frat party is a celebration, and I dance as easily as ever in my black patent leather high-heeled shoes. Every bridge game is special, as time after time I recklessly bid my hands too high. My partner Alex, as always, coaches me in his gravelly voice, "Play 'em like you got 'em." I smile and bluff away, soaking up the easy banter, the warm camaraderie that I shall always treasure. I never thought about mortality before, or how I can make my life count. If all that I can give to the people I care about is memories, I want them to be pleasant ones.
Beauty.